Suraj Gogoi is a doctoral candidate in sociology at the National University of Singapore, and his doctoral project looks at riverine areas and people in contemporary Assam to understand state making in the region. Prior to joining NUS, he earned his MA in Development Studies from TISS Mumbai and an MPhil in Sociology from Delhi School of Economics. He has published his works in various journals and popular forums like Fountain Ink, Asia Times, The Wire, Countercurrents, LSE South Asia Blog, etc. etc. He is also a part of the Pansao Collective, which manages an academic blog on Northeast India. Tista ma'am, of course, needs no introduction, but still. Tista Setalvad is an Indian civil rights activist and journalist. She is the Secretary of Citizens for Justice and Peace, an organization formed to fight for justice for the victims of communal violence in the state of Gujarat in 2002. For 2 years now, CGP has been working in Assam. They are helping people left out of the final NRC defend their citizenship before FTs by training paralegals to assist appearing before FTs. May I ask the first speaker, Suraj Gogoi, to go ahead?
Good evening, everyone. Thank you to the Northeast Collective here and the Ambedkar Career Studies Circle for having me here today. I have very few things to add on the wake of the testimonies that we, all witnessed and heard. And for me, testimonies are the most direct representative democracy of victims. And what we did hear and see speaks volumes of the whole NRC process. It's a very complex exercise, and in order to really get into the nuances of the whole process, one of the ways to do it perhaps is to really understand what is Assamese nationalism, right? Because that is at the core of the whole exercise, and it forms the human basis of legislative infrastructure such as NRC. And in this respect, I want to speak about two organizations that are crucial in the history of Assam. The first is the Assam Sahitya Sabha, which is the Assam Literary Society, and its role in pushing the linguistic side of, or lighting up the linguistic basis of Assamese nationalism. And if you were to trace the genealogy of their role in embedding this kind of hate for the outsider, their role is extremely crucial. And if you just look into the 6 years of Assam movement, Assam agitation, as it is called, from 79 to 85, which ends with signing of the Assam Accord in 85. If you just trace the speeches made by the presidents the president of Assam Sahitya Sabha, each of these years, you will see the framing of who is a foreigner. And I'd like to quote one of the speeches made in 1979 by the then president Atul Chandra Borua. So he makes a distinction between within the foreigner, two kinds. One is an Indian foreigner, or as he calls Indian outsider, and the other is a non-Indian outsider. And he goes on to describe how these questions of indigenous, questions of resource scarcity is perceived, but those are not the concerns, the primary concerns of the Sahitya Sabha. Languages and the role of and the emphasis of language being the core of attaining a kind of autonomy within Assam for the indigenous is the push of Assamese language, and its effort culminates in 1960 with the language movement as we saw in Assam. hegemony of Sahitya Sabha becomes very apparent in its role, or rather the positions that Assam Sahitya Sabha took when Assamese language was sort of withdrawn from present-day Arunachal Pradesh, which was known as NEPA, Northeast Frontier Agency at that point of time. So if you look into the kind of formulations or the kind of debates that the Assam Sahitya Sabha was trying to generate in 1958, 1957, and starting with 1956, is that it was it was not at all happy that Assamese was withdrawn from NEPA, and it went on to assert its importance and that it needs to be brought back. And you could see its remnants in the MP, then MP of Assam, Hem Borwa, who was also actively involved in the affairs of Sahitya Sabha, and is quite a renowned literary figure in Assam. Also spoke of this sort of the need for Assamese to be reintroduced rather, in Arunachal Pradesh, present day Arunachal Pradesh. So, and you can see this linguistic hegemony forming a very strong basis to re-articulate the rights of so-called indigenous population in Assam. And along with it, now if you sort of move ahead a couple of decades ahead and look into the current debate that took place a couple of months ago on Mia poetry, of which some of you might be aware, and Salim Hussain, a prominent Mia poet, did also visit this institute a couple of months back, and so this whole linguistic sort of opposition of an opposition to expressing their humiliation, their suffering of living in Assam, being part of the Assamese society, and the sort of the opposition to even writing and speaking about these humiliation and suffering was opposed by many intellectuals, and then you see the entire sort of discourse opening up to a larger audience who opposed in their own different ways, and there were at least 4 FIRs filed against the poets, Mia poets. So this linguistic hegemony of Assamese is very apparent, and one should take into account the linguistic component, how it has been used and misused over the years, not only by the Sahitya Sabha, but by different organizations, be it ASU or otherwise different civil society organizations in Assam, in sort of articulating and asserting this kind of an Assamese ideology, if you may. And to move on to the second body, which is of prime importance in thinking about how this sort of an Assamese ideology becomes very prominent in understanding NRC, is the All Assam Student Union. And its role is far too popular in terms of Assam movement, but to just give you a brief of how their involvement with the NRC process is to do with how they have been involved in different capacities. One was when the first draft was published, the second draft rather, in 2018, they sort of directed the different student unions in Northeast, in the contiguous states, in Meghalaya, in Arunachal Pradesh, in Mizoram, to sort of create checkposts, right? So in Meghalaya, it was called the Infiltrators Check Gate, which was sort of erected by the Khasi Student Union. And in Arunachal Pradesh, similarly, the ASU members went to even Itanagar to hold meetings with the different student bodies, which were sort of spearheaded by the All Arunachal Pradesh Student Union, and they sort of released a notice and gave a period of 15 days to leave Arunachal, all the non-Arunachalis, or ones who didn't have a sort of a valid document to enter the state. And they called it as Operation Clean Drive. And this was at the behest of ASU. And again, when the other list was published, before the claims and objection period was about to get over, the ASU took active role in filing complaints, and it ran to lakhs, 2-3 lakhs, in number of complaints were filed actively just by the ASU volunteers, and they made sure that more people suffer in this whole process. So this is just an excerpt of the extent to which ASU as a student body is involved very actively in the affairs of the state, and strictly here speaking in terms of NRC. To move on beyond that, so what do we one of the prime questions that one should ask is who are the sympathizers of NRC, or who does it appeal to, right? And there have been a lot of debates in which the Assam case is being compared to what happened in Germany in terms of the Nazi ideology. And you see a lot of parallels in terms of how the psychology of Nazism worked vis-a-vis the psychology of NRC. And there are strange parallels, and I would like to sort of point out two such parallels that we see between the Nazi ideology and the Assamese ideology. The first is to do with their very profound hate for the stranger, or the one who is unknown, or the one who is sort of doubted in public sphere, or in the larger sort of way in which the cultural communities are arranged. So this hate for the stranger was very much apparent in terms of Nazi Germany, and so is the case with Assam. The second sort of parallel is to do with this weird fetish for the, in terms of articulating their ideology, a weird fetish for the understanding of scarcity, and scarcity in terms of economic deprivation, as if 10 more people come, we won't be able to carry on with our life forward. And this sort of understanding comes from a place where the excess of population, or the increase of population, be it a natural increase, be it migration into a different territory, is premised on this notion that and it's premised on the notion where this kind of excess is always blamed on the people, right? So it's always said that, oh, look at them, the Muslims, they have a higher birth rate, and or similar sort of discourses flowing when migrants are coming due to different reasons, be it war, be it natural calamities, so on and so forth. So this problem of excess is sort of articulated in terms of blaming the people, rather than, and which what it does is it shifts the attention from our institutions, which are actually incapable of sort of accommodating this excess, are unable to sort of provide for the excess of requirement in education, in healthcare, in other social security measures. And this is not an argument that I'm making. This has already been made by people like Barrington Jr., and sociologists such as Jigman Bowman, where they have sort of highlighted this inadequacy of institutions to accommodate this excess of people, and that sort of a lack in criticism shifts the blame to the people. And in the case of Assam is a very interesting case of that kind of economic understanding of the whole problem, which then adds to this larger psychology of NRC and its sympathizers. So I think I won't push beyond this, and what I would like to sort of draw your attention in short is that this whole discourse of creating an illegal body through NRC is not without the history of Assamese nationalism and the questions of Assamese identity, and one should not lose sight of the different actors and agendas that made possible this creation of the so-called other. And when we talk about NRC, and there is an attempt to sort of extend it to across India, so these historical sort of experiences will come to haunt us in our respective places, because the framing of the other will be made based on those historical experiences and how those categories were built historically by different sort of parties that or different organizations and civil society bodies that were in place, and the different political ideologies that were sort of held on to by the different regional forces. So I think the psychology of NRC is a lesson to us in terms of looking forward in ways which we can sort of criticize the whole process, and at the same time understand and explain the complexity of the whole process. Thank you.
Thank you again, Northeast Collective, and all of you for being here, all students being here on a Saturday evening. I just wanted to, before we get into NRC in particular, I just wanted to say this entire exercise, which has been the exercise of getting in extremely unlettered and marginalized sections of our population, migrant workers, daily wage earners, to prove, quote unquote, their citizenship, is actually something like the power of the document, the power of the privilege, and a large number of the victims are the most marginalized. And it sounds like very obvious what I'm saying. If you look at certain intersectionalities, then you look at the fact that 62% of the quote-unquote victims of the NRC process are women, 69% of the de-voter process are also women, and of course there are the other minorities, linguistic, religious minorities, which we cannot forget. Now, as Suraj just pointed out, certain kind of extreme supremacists, I think the word nationalism also doesn't seem very appealing anymore. I use supremacism now, because I think nationalism itself needs to be claimed back. But you have the entire process in Assam, which has a certain lineage and needs to be remembered at all times. You have also certain quote-unquote process in the rest of India of a certain different kind of supremacism, which is now superimposing or conflicting or in certain ways with the Assamese nationalism or supremacism. And that RSS Hindutva, Hindustan kind of a nationalism, how does it kind of play out within the context of this current debate is extremely important. We also have this whole challenge now before us as a democracy, and not just us, but many democracies of the world. Can the constitution and can the law be liberative? Are they liberative at all? Do they really uphold what is the rule of law, or are they becoming very constricted? Because if you look at our whole construction of citizenship, leave aside Assam for the moment, at the time of the making of the constitution, 1950, you had a much more inclusive citizenship where everybody who was born here had a right to be a citizen. Article 5 to Article 11, very, very clear. And then you see a series of amendments taking place, just as you see a series of happenings happening in the political arena within India. And you have the first major shrinking of that space. You have, of course, in 1986, with the First Amendment, which of course is the Assam, following the Assam Accord. But then you have it in 2003. And 2003 is when the first NDA government has come to power. And then you do not have, therefore, now an unqualified citizenship in India by birth. You have to not only be born in India, if you're born after 1987, but you also have to have had your parents who are Indian citizens and who are not illegal migrants. So you've had a shrinking even in the rest of India, not just in Assam. Just wanted to flag that for a minute. Citizenship law has undergone a huge change. Many of the changes have been brought in through the rules and through executive actions, not through legislative actions and not through parliament, which is also something we need to understand. Coming to the NRC process, before I go to the de-voter process and the suspected foreigner or declared foreigner process, because Assam did not only target quote-unquote who they believed as outsiders through NRC. NRC actually started getting speed in 2005. Supreme Court made it a big agenda post-2009. But you have had a much more vicarious process, much more vicious process, which has been the Assam Border Police empowered since 1962 under an extremely Assam-centric law, where it can just send you a notice and say that you are actually a suspected foreigner. That notice need not be reasoned, it not be based on any document. It is again on the basis of a colonial law, the Assam, the Foreigners Act of 1946. And then, if you are issued a notice by the Foreigners Tribunal, you have to undergo what Anima Didi had to undergo, which is several rounds. The onus is on you. Section 9 of the Foreigners Act makes it onus on me rather than the onus on the prosecution to prove that I'm a foreigner. Public documents are not accepted as public documents. Even public documents I have to do. So before we come to that, what has been the material and human cost of the NRC process? Now, we've heard this, the most heart-wrenching stories today, and imagine 19 lakh of those stories, or imagine 41 lakh of those stories. We've heard just 3 or 4 stories this afternoon. In July, I'll leave this behind for the Northeast Collective. In July 2019, CJP compiled, thanks to our wonderful Assam team, a list of the deaths that have taken place with the Assam NRC process. It was submitted to the Supreme Court. And this is worth a look at because only the first one is 1989, Brijendra Das. After that, all of them began in 2012. And it was 58 when we did this, it's now 65 plus. Bengal has already had 20 deaths. Neighboring Bengal has had 20 deaths by people just fearing the fact that the NRC might come. People are queuing up for documents. So, it is the power of the document. Assam, internally, forget Bangladesh for a minute, has 54% migration because it is a very, very fluid state. You have the riverine areas, you have the Brahmaputra areas, you have villages existing, vanishing. In that situation, how would you preserve your document and what value will that document have? Jamshed has already told us about how callous the NRC authorities have been vis-a-vis the Bengali Hindu population, whose refugee certificates and other documents like that were rejected despite the fact that they were given refuge in India. So it is the power of the document. There was a study done by a risk and analysis group, which is an NGO, which actually said that when 41 lakh people were left out, each family spent an average of 19,000 to 20,000 rupees just to navigate the NRC process, which means you get a staggering total of 7,836 crores. If you're looking at just money that was spent for those 41 lakh people, I'm talking about people spend. I'm not even talking about the state spend or the bureaucracy spend. Okay. The World Bank tells us that between 2005 and now, Assam has dipped sharply in the poverty index. It has just not kept up with the rest of India. So there's some connections there which are not being made and not being studied, which is that this process has also cost us. It has cost us in human terms, in material terms, in production terms, at every level, and this is not being computed or understood. The per capita of the individuals we're talking about, 41 lakh people, from not a very happy figure of 68,000 per year has gone down to 48,000, which is like a pathetic annual figure of per capita income. So all these aspects need to be looked at when we look at the scale of the human tragedy that is not, and the humanitarian crisis, not just in Assam, but what threatens now all of us in India with the current dispensation, which is threatening an NRC following the National Population Register next year. I will not even go into its genocidal implications. It's obvious, it's implicit. It's very, very clear that the supremacist ideology that rules us from Delhi today and many, many Indian states is governed by the notion of an unfinished agenda of partition, and that is why they are pushing, for instance, the Citizen Amendment Bill, which they believe is important for them to kind of complete that agenda. Now, there are certain contradictions vis-a-vis CAB also. I just wanted to flag because there's a very interesting audience here, that you have the amendment being brought in, which of course the bill lapsed and they're threatening to bring it again, that a list of religious minorities, all excluding Muslims, provided they come from 3 countries, Pakistan, Afghanistan and Bangladesh, will be given refuge. Question, of course, begs this thing is, what about other countries? Apart from Myanmar, and what about the Hazaras of Afghanistan? What about the Sri Lankan Tamils and the Sri Lankan Hindus? So certain countries are excluded from this persecution label. Therefore, I'm calling it the unfinished agenda of partition notion. So is CAB going to be a solution for those being left out of NRC? I think that's also, it's very contradictory. It's not going to be so easy. And then now more and more nuanced discussions are coming out, and that is why I think the ruling party is stuck. Otherwise, there is no reason why, just like what they did in Kashmir, they would not have brought an ordinance and bringing care just 1 week before the last list was out. So, I just wanted to flag that issue. Now, so CAB, but what they have already done is, they have amended the passport rules. They have amended the passport rules in September of 2015 so that Parsis, Christians, Buddhists, Sikhs, Jains are can prove they are from a persecuted these three countries, will not be sent to detention camps if they are found to be living in a certain area. And they've already, so those rules have been passed against executive action, not legislative action, and they have been challenged in the Supreme Court, which is coming up after the vacation. So already they are trying through various executive actions, trying to create this feeling that a certain section will not be touched. Now coming back to Assam for a moment, like I mentioned before, that we've had not just the NRC process, but long before that, you have to understand the discourse, I mean, Suraj put it very well, but the whole discourse around the issue of the foreigner, the infiltrator, the demographic change, how did this gain legitimacy within Assam and nationally? And who played a role? I mean, this really pains me to say it, but one of our better home ministers, in the past, Indrajit Gupta, said in Parliament on 6th of May 1997 that there are 10 million illegal immigrants in India, quoting Home Ministry and IB records. Later on, the same ministry went on to say there is no proof of this is just loose figures that were let go. Then on 8th of November 1998, Lieutenant General Sinha, who was the Lieutenant General of then Governor of Assam, he submits a report to the then President K.R. Narayanan on the grave threat posed by illegal immigration. In the report, he says that the dangerous consequences of a large-scale migration from Bangladesh is there for the nation as a whole, and he, of course, predicts a huge figure, and that which is 50 lakhs. So I mean, that's what you have 10 lakhs, and becomes 50 lakhs, and by the time NRC comes with this whole figure of 1 crore and 2 crores floating around, none of this, like Amrita said right in the beginning, is based on any scientific thing from the border police, nothing. It is just a whole bogey that has been created. And interestingly, thereafter, Jaiswal, who's the UPA minister, on 14th July 2004, he says that 1.20 crores, the last figure we've been hearing, 1.20 crores of illegal Bangladeshi immigrants out of 50 lakhs are in Assam. Okay. Now, after that, he issues a clarification. He says this in Parliament. Then he issues a clarification saying that these reported figures are not based on any comprehensive or sample study. But it doesn't help. Even today, though we know that the Gujarat genocidal figures are close to 2,000, the figure in Parliament says 700, and that's the figure that is touted by India Today even today. So it doesn't really help. Once you make a statement in Parliament, unless you get it removed, unless you get it put back on record, these things don't matter. So it is in the context of this entire bogey that was created that you have the Delhi massacre. Please remember that we talk about Gujarat, we talk about in 1984 the anti-Sikh pogrom in Delhi, as we should. But Delhi has just dropped from our memory, public memory. 18th of February 1983, 2,500 Muslims are massacred. It's not the only incident in Assam. There are several communal incidents which are pogroms against the religious minority. Assam movement, a lot has been said on that, I will not repeat it. You have the Assam Accord, 1985, but in between you have the IMDT Act being brought in, which really becomes important because the IMDT Act was an attempt by the government to do a patch-up. It was an attempt to kind of, it's called the Illegal Migrant Detention Act, brought in 1983 by the Indira Gandhi government, and there's again an upsurge against that act in Assam, because the onus of proof under this act changes back to the state, like other criminal law. So they and this was welcomed by the minorities, linguistic and religious, but again there's a whole uproar against, and no less than the former congressman and present BJP chief minister of the state, Mohammed Sanaullah, goes to court and gets 2 judgments in his favor. Act is actually declared null and void. And the language of the Supreme Court, I mean, I find that quite important. The language of the Supreme Court in Sanaullah is something that we need to remember, because it's not only the bureaucracy and the governments that have been using this bogey, but it has percolated into our judiciary very, very closely. And the Sanaullah language, in fact, in 2005, the Supreme Court holds that Article 355 of the Constitution has been violated, as the Union had failed to protect the state of Assam against external aggression and internal disturbance caused by the huge influx of illegal migrants from Bangladesh to Assam. This judgment has become a precedent and is now well entrenched in our judicial jurisprudence. And that until we are able, collectively through democratic movements, to change this institutional perception, I think we're just going to make a few in Chen, this thing, survey, we're not going to make much of a difference. What happens to people? What's going to happen now in Assam? It's a question that Kamshil and I discuss maybe 4 times a week because there's a lot of confusion. The NRC itself is in a state of paralysis and confusion because 19 lakhs, huge figure for us, all of us here, 41 lakhs, an even bigger figure. But for those who wanted to use the bogey of 1.5 crores and 50 lakhs, it seems like too small a figure. So therefore, please understand that though the list has come out, though I know today whether I'm in the NRC or not, I don't know the reasons why I'm out. Reasons have not been given to me. And the NRC is constantly extending the dates for that. And the belief is that the extension of dates is because they're trying to cook up the reasons. And once they cook up the reasons, once they give me the reasons, only then will I be able to, will my 120-day clock start ticking, which is when I have to go to the foreigners' tribunals. Do I have an option? Do I have to go to the foreign tribunal? Do I have the option of not going to it? 3.70 lakhs out of the 90 lakhs who are left out of NRC did not even apply. This is for a matter of information. And we believe those people are those from North India, West India, South India who just did not want to go through that onerous process. Now, can those people actually afford not to get the situation rectified? What about welfare schemes? What about government jobs? What about a whole lot of things that may or may not follow? Because on an average, a foreigner tribunal case might take 1 year or 2 years or 3 years. It could take 6 years. Then if it goes against you, what about the appeal? Will the state appeal all of those who are declared Indian or not? I mean, it's a complete mess. My colleague Samshedji has sort of calculated on an average that for these 19 lakh people, 11,000 crores is the ballpark figure. If you call 30,000 and 30,000, 30,000 you pay the lawyer, 30,000 is your expenses for going up and down to various courts, modest 60,000 per person, then this is the kind of cost that you're going to have to pay. How have the foreigners' tribunals been functioning? I just like to say before I conclude that because law has unfortunately become one of one's obsessions at the moment, that the foreigners' tribunal, the very establishment of the foreigners' tribunals has not been on a bed of constitutionality or legality. The Foreigners Act of 1946, as you saw in the film 1932 and all, allows for detention camps to be set up. There is no process in the Foreigners Act which gives you a process for detection of foreigner. There is an order, MHA order of 1964, and there is an MHA order of 1948, which is an executive order which allows for the setting up of tribunals. But Sonowal 1 and Sonowal 2 have legitimized the tribunals by saying that, okay, the IMDT tribunals go, send everyone to the foreigners' tribunal. So there's been an oblique legitimization. But can you actually have a foreigner tribunal which functions in the way they are? Normal tribunals like your income tax tribunal or your NGT or all your other tribunals are set up under Article 323A and B of the Constitution. There are certain provisions. You have to function in a certain way. Every tribunal has to think of a procedure, civil procedure, criminal procedure. Except for the income tax tribunal, all tribunals are open to the public. The foreigners' tribunals are shrouded in secrecy. We have tried, my colleagues have tried, I have tried to get it, nobody can enter. So the person accused, your lawyer, and what happens within the precincts of the thing is closed. So according to us, and that's the demand we've been making, it actually circumvents the basics of natural justice because it's not public, media is not allowed, I can't take 3 support persons, and you don't know exactly what transpired. Out of the 1,11,000 cases referred to foreigners' tribunals, 68% were decided ex parte. These are government figures. Ex parte means I've not even been heard there. So the order is passed without me being heard. Recently, the Guwahati High Court passed an order saying that out of 232 orders, a tribunal member complained to say that many judgments, 52 or 53, were passed without signatures. Signatures of the judge. So you have all sorts of anomalies. Judicial officers are not the ones being appointed today. Now you have lawyers with 4 years or 5 years of experience who are not really trained in evaluating evidence, paid 90,000 rupees salary, not bad at all in a recession in India. So people are queuing up for those jobs, okay? But whether they are qualified to handle them or not is the other question. So we have also undertaken this exercise, and for any of you who want to help us, we really welcome your help because we are asking for legal interns and all, is that we've actually accessed 1,200 foreigner tribunal orders, and we're actually analyzing them to be able to take them to the higher court and say that please, look at the trends we are seeing. Terms like projected father, projected mother are being evolved in these tribunals. Projected father and projected mother. There are biases, obviously. There is discrepancies of name, like you saw in Sakin Ali's case in the film. So there are various levels of trainings you can see. We've done 2 paralegal trainings in Guwahati recently, and we had lawyers from the district telling us that tribunal members are actually threatening lawyers, those lawyers who are doing a competent job. So a lot of things are happening which are not strictly within the legal thing, and therefore the functioning of foreigners tribunals is going to be quite critical to ensuring a modicum of justice to this whole process. What will NRC mean for the rest of India is a question we also can't avoid, and I don't know whether this is the time or the place to deal with it, but I think we will need to deal with it, because just as Assam had a specificity, agree or disagree, it came out of the Assam Accord, NRC in the rest of India has been brought in simply as a mechanism to divide people, to create great senses of social conflict and insecurities in people, as we've already seen in Bengal. So what should be our responses as citizens, as political groups, as social groups, is also something that is very, very needed. If it is brought in, needless to say, we'll have to step in and help. But can we afford to not oppose it at the outset? The TMC, for whatever it's worth, has passed a resolution in the Bengal Assembly opposing the NRC. I think it's very important for opposition governments to take that stand and to actually also oppose the Citizenship Amendment Bill when it comes in. So all these things are linked in a certain way. I don't want to take more time. I think it's important to have a discussion. I'm sure a few points I have left out, but we've really seen the state at its most vicarious, at its most vicious, and with many of us human rights defenders and activists who've been accustomed to seeing very brutal faces of the state, I don't think even I've seen such a brutal face of the state as I've seen in this entire NRC citizenship process. Thank you.
So I don't want to say too much. I just want to kind of discharge my duty as a chair and have as many people ask questions, especially if there are many of our BTech students come here. I would like them to actually, learn from these experiences, ask these people what they want, so that we can kind of know more about what is happening around us. I only want to kind of, highlight a few points that came out from the talk, and I want to highlight 2 points. The first thing is this perverse relationship between literature, politics, and nationalism. When you look at the Assam Sahitya Sabha playing such a big role in demonizing foreigners, dehumanizing other human beings, other equally good human beings, one sees a very perverse relationship between literature, politics, and nationalism, and one must be very wary, of institutions like this, of phenomena like this. The second point I would like to make is this fetish that Suraj mentioned around scarcity, and how this fetish works. This fetish always works in, what would you say, demonizing the poor, demonizing those who already have nothing, and if you look at what Tista said, the amount of money, the amount of resources that have been kind of shelled out, by a state that is supposedly suffering from scarcity in order to get rid of so-called foreigners, one can just see the foolishness behind the whole exercise, and this is a foolishness that is very, very malicious in nature, So these are the 2 points that I would like to highlight. One can actually kind of end with this poem by John Keats, the naughty boy who went to Scotland, The poem is actually written in the context of the demonization of Scotland, which is a northern area, north of England, full of tribals who are primitive, not as civilized as the Englishmen, etc., etc. And the poem is actually about a naughty boy going to Scotland, going to this area where there are supposed to be foreigners, dangerous foreigners, and finding everything to be exactly the same as in his home country, And the poem ends with the following lines: he stood on his shoes and he wondered and he wondered. He stood on his shoes and he wondered. And I think that's what we need to do, We need to actually think about what the hell is going on, And we need to be given the chance to think and to wonder about what the hell is going on around us. So with that, I would like to open the floor for questions. Please.
linguistic perspective, do you think that Harshmandar's PIL was a mistake? Now, as we look back, because many people have written about it, and the way Supreme Court has, whatever CJI spoke in the court has written. So, do you think was it a strategic mistake?
I'll make a diplomatic answer. Just to say that I think very often in movements when we are trying to battle the state, remedies are sought by going to the very top, and I think that's a really, we discovered in Gujarat, for instance, that the modicum, not huge, but the modicum of success we got in getting 172 perpetrators punished, which was very difficult, is that we really plot it out from the institutions below, and I think it's important to go to the Sessions Court, the District Courts, the Tribunals, the Guwahati High Court, because particularly when we could see in the case of the NRC that the Supreme Court has unfortunately had an agenda of its own. So, and I think it's important therefore to sometimes bide your time and collect data and think of the right time to do it. And there are, various high courts, and the Guwahati High Court gave a surprisingly good order on the 19th of September on the foreigner tribunal issue. So, things do change sometimes with individuals. So, in that sense, probably.
My question is, the way we are trying to communicate this problem is through hope that some sort of human decency and compassion can be evoked. But what we see is that cruelty is the point behind it. Cruelty is the glue that binds a series of public policies that have been promulgated in the past few years. So, is there an alternative form of communication? Because we as civil society, as part of human rights researchers, etc., are prone to thinking that the state is capable of shame. Now we are in a situation where that logic is not working, at least after the post-2019 bewilderment. That is one of the realizations that has hit. So should there be an alternate form of communication, of mobilization that can counter a state that is almost immune to basic human decency?
I get your point, and I think we need to think of very creative and alternate modes of challenge, if you like, and not just communication, but also challenge, which also challenge ourselves and the way we've been looking at things. And I think one of the things which we've probably not done enough of, and I address myself always first, is looking enough at intersectionalities of movements, because sometimes in these intersectionalities, you actually build very solid alliances, and your numbers, the figures change, the faces change, the faces of the victims change. I'll just give a quick example by what I mean, in case I'm not clear. Is like quite apart from the NRC, a huge other assault that has come from the state and also the judiciary has been the decision to evict Adivasis, 1 crore, 10 lakh Adivasis, which was a crazy order that came out in February. The court had to go back on it within a week because the central government had to show at least that it was not against the Adivasis. But in the 6 months that followed, there were about 19 interventions in the Supreme Court from various Adivasi organizations, including the All India Union of Forest Working People, of which I am Vice President. And the reason I'm saying it is that the court case is not in itself anything, but the fact that we could show that this entire bit of, because you're from the sciences, I'll tell you, the satellite imagery and all this kind of nonsense that the Forest Survey was using to try and show that, Adivasis and forest dwellers actually cut forests and all, which we all know is untrue. That all got exposed in the last 4 hearings because there was a semi-united front put up. So I don't know about what we can put up against hope. Hope is one of those things that you need to just keep going. But I think you certainly need to have other strategies of showing intersectional battles. For instance, if you look at the whole forest right issue in Assam, you see that it's never been taken up locally. And you have the whole issue of many T tribes and scheduled tribes not even listed as tribes in Assam. So forget whether they're Muslim or Hindu, they don't enjoy their rights as scheduled tribes under the Forest Rights Act. So if we were to be able to work on that, I'm not saying right now we're working on other things, but I think a lot of intersectionalities would emerge which might throw a challenge to the state that is trying to box us into these very brute identities. Because I think one of the faces of the state that we are seeing post-2019 is the constant track to harp on this Hindu-Muslim binary and the Muslim as this huge evil demon, you know. So anything that breaks that in any way, and I think the Muslims after NRC are living, I don't know whether you experience it, but they're living in a complete state of panic and fear, you know. So what is our responsibility then, and what should our responsibilities be at that point of time? Not just in cities like Mumbai, but in smaller places. I mean, I've heard stories in UP where people tell me that, you know, the RSS is talking about throwing us all out and capturing our lands. So things are being let loose. No, but these are, you know, not jokes. They're being let loose at the shaka and this thing level. And then you find echoes which are coming from the very top in terms of abuse. So you don't know what is actually getting around. So it's also a takeover by the state, by people who don't at all believe in the constitution. No?
And that's a very interesting sort of way to frame hope. And I think one of the problems of solidarity is that we base a lot of our energy on hope, but I think that is the problem. I would go on to suggest that maybe co-hoping is a way out where we actually appreciate the hope of the other. By saying that we hope, we actually assume what, you know, our hope is reflected on the victim, but that doesn't accommodate the hope of the victim. And by when we say that we belong to a community and we stand in solidarity because we think that they are also part of our community, and I think that is a way to start thinking about the psychology of the victim and thinking about perhaps co-hoping instead of hoping.
My question is related to that question. There is this Gorkha community who collectively refuse to participate in a process. So what happens? The process is this. This is also a mess. Everyone is saying. Are we legitimizing this process by participating, or the very important aspect of this is the legitimization. The moment you refuse to participate, is this a way out?
I'm sorry, I'm taking the liberty of asking him because he really knows the intricacy of the situation.
You see, some sections of Gorkha community, not only in Gorkha community, but even some organizations belonging to Bengali Hindu community, they are also saying that they will not take part in foreigners' tribunal. They are not going to foreigners' tribunal because they are not foreigner in India. If they does not go to foreigners' tribunal, then the reference case will be lost against them. Then who will take the responsibility? As of today, if someone knocks the door of foreigners' tribunal, it will be decided on the basis of citizenship. And if government or district magistrate sends the reference case, then it will be decided on foreigners' act. That is more troublesome. So we have no option to escape of the foreigners' tribunal at present. But one thing you should remember, which I elaborated yesterday, that the 3,70,000 people did not submit their reclaim application. And all the stakeholders of the sovereign and communal forces used to label that these people are original Bangladeshi, and so that they did not apply, submitted their reclaim application. But on 5th of October, we challenged that you please publish the total list who did not submit their reclaim application. We challenged. Repeatedly we challenged it. And immediately you send the reference against those who did not submit their reclaim application. Now, but the government has no courage to send reference cases in foreigners tribunal against those, because if they do this, then many of our IAS officers will have to face foreigners tribunal, and if those cases are trials as a like other Bengali Hindus and Muslims, they will never be Indian, declared as Indian. And for that reason, on 5th of October, government has again amended the Foreigner Settlement Amendment Order 2019, second time. And in that order, they say that district magistrate will investigate about the status quo of those people, 370,000 people, whether they are Indian or not. If they are Indian or Indian origin, then no reference cases will be sent against those. But they did not say anything about those victims, whereas they are Gorkhas or not, and such other cases.
Now I've allowed him to say that because I want to say something else. I think he was talking about a political response, so I'll give that answer. See, the problem also today is the complete shambles of the political opposition. I would think that that's a very viable position to take, and would have been a viable position to take in 2011, 12, 13, 14, if you had an opposition that was able to take this on. Now, the frightening thing is that whether it is the left, organized left, the parliamentary left, whether it's the centrist forces, whether it's the South Indian DMK and the CPM and Kerala don't even want to look at it, they think it's never going to affect them. Okay? And in Assam, if you look at the state of the left, they've just not addressed this issue, they've in fact been compromised on this issue. So the stand that you're taking off would be very valid if there was a viable, vibrant political opposition, because that can only be taken by a human rights group or a civil rights group. You cannot take a position that boycott the NRC. But whereas if you had a vibrant opposition in Assam, principle that was not getting constantly caught up in this quagmire, we'll be seen as pro-minority, we'll be seen as this, we'll be seen as that. There's never been a principled stand on citizenship through the years, and it's just gotten worse. So I think it would be a very valid question if India actually had a viable political opposition which could take this on, but who's going to do it today? Can you really, as civil liberties organizations or civil society organizations, I honestly can't take the risk. I don't have that reach, I don't have that organization to be able to publicly advocate that stand. Because how will you back people with it? How do you back people taking that stand? They are very poor people, very marginalized. They will be harassed without undergoing the process. So you can do it if you have this viable political opposition space, which just seems to have vanished.
And big hand for our speakers. Thank you so much for coming. Thank you.
May I request Manjita and Akshay to please participate on this. So, it is most urgent that we make clear imports of categories to recover any genuine cultural contents and meanings that are otherwise erased by the nationalist discourse. Will we uphold the exclusivist notion of a nationalism having colonial origin that left us with the ill-defined nation states in a planet that has grown so beautifully without boundaries for countless years? Whatever be the case, we must find answers collectively, but with some basic human love for the fellow human beings. With this, we come to the end of today's event. I thank everyone for joining us today.